I wasn't looking for anything. That's the part people don't believe. They think I came to that dusty flea market with some romantic idea, like fate had planted a treasure for me under the shade of a blue tarp next to cracked lawn chairs and mismatched porcelain teacups. But the truth is, I came to avoid things. Bills, phone calls, my own reflection. The air was thick with heat, and the kind of murmuring that only happens when people are trying not to get swindled and failing. I kept my sunglasses on, even in the shade. Avoiding eye contact is a skill you pick up when you've spent your life trying not to give people a reason to underestimate you. Or worse, try to fix you. The violin was half hidden under a pile of used books and costume jewelry. I only saw the edge of the case. It wasn't even a nice one. Peeling brown vinyl with a busted zipper and a smell like mildew and forgotten regret. I should have kept walking. But you know that feeling you get sometimes? Like the universe taps your shoulder just once. Gentle but impossible to ignore. I opened the case. It was broken. Not cosmetically. The neck was splintered. The strings were curled like dead vines. And the bow was missing entirely. But something about it made my chest tighten. It had been loved once. You could tell by the worn fingerboard and the faint ghost of rosin on the belly. Whoever played this violin didn't just practice. They lived with it, fought with it, slept with it inches from their bed. I could almost hear it scream. "You don't want that," said a voice behind me. I looked up and saw him. Hawaiian shirt, clip-on sunglasses, smiling like someone who'd already sold me the lie, just waiting for me to sign the receipt. "It's just a prop," he added. "Had it in the back since a theater group left town." I looked at him. "How much?" He blinked. "Seriously?" I didn't repeat myself. He tilted his head like he was doing me a favor. £5. I'll even throw in the case." It felt wrong, like paying for a tombstone with pennies. But I handed him the money, and he shoved the case toward me like it was a hot tray. "Good luck with that." He didn't mean the violin. I took it home, propped it against a chair, and stared at it like it might open its mouth and speak. Something in me stirred that hadn't moved in years. Music. Not just sound, but the kind that comes with memory. The kind that yanks you backward by the collar into a room full of light and trembling hands and the smell of wood and sweat and fear. I used to play. I was good. Not Juilliard good, but scholarship good. Then life did what it does. My father left, my mother broke, and I stopped playing. One day, I simply didn't go to the audition, didn't go back to school, didn't answer calls. You can't half love something like that. It's either all of you or none of you. And I'd chosen none. But now there was this broken thing sitting in my flat like an accusation. I picked it up, gingerly at first, like touching an old wound. I ran my fingers over the splinters, over the empty pegs. I knew I couldn't restore it myself, but I knew who could. Enter Elsie. 76 years old, lived 3 doors down. Used to build custom violins for the Royal Philharmonic before arthritis curled her fingers and time stole her clientele. She had a parrot named Claude who swore in French, and a collection of horror movies alphabetized by gore level. She was the only person on my street who didn't talk to me like I was an accident in progress. She opened the door, squinted at the case, and didn't say hello. "You finally came to your senses." I blinked. "Excuse me? You've been walking around like a ghost with bills. Claude told me you used to play." I side-eyed the parrot. "Claude's a liar." "Claude doesn't lie," she said. "He exaggerates. Big difference." Then she snatched the case from my hands and vanished into her den. The next 3 weeks were different. She let me watch. Sometimes she even let me help. I learned things about glue weights and grain direction and the patience required to realign a soul. because that's what it felt like, watching her rebuild that violin. It wasn't just wood and varnish. It was resurrection. She didn't speak much while she worked, but when she did, it was usually to tell me stories. About musicians who could make a room cry. About a girl who once played so fiercely the strings snapped mid-sonata and she didn't stop. "That was you," she said one night, not looking up. I shook my head. "That girl's gone." She clicked her tongue. "Then maybe you should stop feeding her ghost." By the time the violin was finished, it didn't look perfect. The body bore its scars proudly, the way people do after surviving something violent in private. The varnish was uneven, the bridge slightly crooked. But when I tucked it under my chin, something in the room shifted. "Play," Elsie said, like it wasn't a request. I hesitated. "Do it now or Claude will?" The first note was a wheeze. The second, a scrape. By the fifth, I was crying. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. And it was mine. Elsie nodded once. "You're not done." She was right. I wasn't. I didn't plan the next part. I wish I could say I had a strategy or a dream board or some noble idea about art reclaiming space. But no, what I had was an invitation, handwritten, from the City Guild, a kind of open-air performance and charity auction in the market square. They were looking for quirky talent with heart. Elsie had sent in my name, without asking. "You owe me," she said, "and the violin." The day of the performance, the square was a buzz of color and scent, children with sticky hands, men in suits pretending not to judge, women selling organic jam, and in the middle, a raised platform where the performers took their turns, magicians, singers, one guy with a unicycle and a clarinet. When my name was called, the laughter was soft, but audible. I heard someone whisper, "She looks like a school teacher who lost her class." I walked up anyway. The violin was slung over my shoulder. My heart was in my throat. And then I played. People talk about time slowing down. That's not true. What happens is that you speed up. You become more than yourself. And as the bow moved, I felt years peel off me like dead skin. I played every note like it owed me an apology. I played like I'd never been broken, like the world hadn't tried to fold me small. And slowly, people stopped. The square quieted. Even the jam lady froze. When I hit the final note, I swear, for a second the silence was holy. Then someone clapped. Then everyone did, but not all clapping is the same. Some is polite. This was reverent. And then I saw him. Front row, arms crossed. A tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. The man from the flea market. Only now, he wasn't in a Hawaiian shirt. He was wearing a City Guild badge, and he was looking directly at me. I didn't react, not outwardly. Inwardly, my blood had turned to ice water. That smug little half smile of his, the kind people wear when they think they know exactly how the story ends. I stepped down from the platform slowly, violin still in hand, the applause fading like a passing siren. The man was waiting just past the stage's edge, arms folded, the guild badge clipped neatly to his lapel like a warning label. "Impressive," he said. His voice was smoother now, less flea market charm, more bureaucratic velvet. "Didn't expect that from a casual performer." There it was, the passive-aggressive condescension, polished and rehearsed. "I wasn't performing," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I was remembering." He smiled like that was cute. "Of course. Well, thank you for participating. If you'd like to register as a guild-recognized musician, we can provide access to equipment loans, event booking, maybe even mentorship. Though I should warn you, the instrument you're using doesn't meet guild performance standards." Ah, there it was. The dig. "It met them just fine 15 minutes ago," I said. His smile didn't falter. That was a public event, not a juried showcase. And I realized he hadn't forgotten me. This wasn't about the violin. This was about control. I'd taken his discarded thing, turned it into something powerful, and now I wasn't obeying the script. He took a step closer. There are proper channels, vetting procedures. If you're serious about music, you'll want to do things the right way. People notice when someone skips the line. I laughed. Dry, soft. You think I skipped the line? His face didn't move, but his eyes narrowed. We maintain a certain standard here. Reputation matters. I stared at him, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't shrink. I'm not applying to your club, I said. I just played my heart out on a violin you thought belonged in a bin. I think we're done here. I walked away. That should have been the end of it. But of course, it wasn't. 2 days later, Elsie called. They denied your registration, she said without preamble. I didn't apply for registration. They said your name came up through a community referral, which I may or may not have submitted. They reviewed your public performance and decided you were inappropriate for endorsement. I laughed. What does that even mean? Elsie paused. It means he's trying to bury you. The thing about systems like the Guild, they're always dressed in civility, but they enforce their control like a religion. You don't get blacklisted. You just stop getting invited. Events dry up. Mentors disappear. Venues suddenly fully booked. You become a non-person in polite company. I wasn't surprised, but I was furious. So I did what I do best. I dug. The internet is a funny place. People leave traces. You just have to know where to look. I started with the Guild directory, then worked backwards. Press releases, public records, funding announcements. I mapped out the names on the board, their connections, the overlapping patterns of nepotism and funding, and subtle retaliation against anyone who challenged the hierarchy. It didn't take long to find him. Andrew Barringer, former stage manager turned Guild coordinator, known for curating excellence, which, from what I could tell, meant curating obedience. I found archived footage of him introducing acts, always the same tone, faint praise, careful detachment, a man who liked being the gate, not the artist. But what got my attention wasn't him. It was a woman. She appeared in a few old articles. Pianist, early Guild talent, glowing reviews. Her name was Leora Vance. Beautiful, serious. The kind of face that makes silence feel like a symphony. Then, nothing. She vanished from records after 2017. I found a message board thread buried deep in an old forum. Musicians whispering about how she'd confronted the Guild over misappropriated funds, favoritism, and how they'd slowly erased her from showcases, venues, even teaching opportunities. She'd left the city. Nobody knew where. Something in my chest tightened. This wasn't new. This was a pattern. Elsie came over that night. She didn't knock, just barged in with a half-empty bottle of something probably illegal and a look that said she was done being subtle. I know that look, she said. You're planning something. I nodded. I'm going to play again. You just did. No, I said. I'm going to play where it matters. Loud enough they can't ignore it. And I'm going to make sure people know why they tried to silence me. Her eyes glittered. You're going to start a war with the Guild. I'm going to play music, I said. They can make that mean war if they want. She grinned. Claude's in. Claude from his perch squawked, Merde bureaucratique. The next week was a blur. I used everything I'd learned from my former life, from grant writing days and backroom planning committees, to build something they couldn't shut down without being obvious. I called it Unregistered. A one-night performance, open air, no audition, no registration, just music. I borrowed space from a disused church courtyard near the edge of town. I messaged everyone I knew, students, buskers, fringe artists, even Leora's old contacts. Word spread like fire on dry paper. People were starving for a place to belong that didn't ask for a resume first. We made flyers that looked like old wanted posters. Bring what they told you to hide. That was the tagline. The night of the performance, the courtyard filled up before sunset. Musicians tuned in corners, dancers stretched against stone walls. Someone dragged in a cello on a skateboard, and I waited, violin in hand. People came, dozens at first, then hundreds. And just before I stepped onto the makeshift stage, a pallet covered in carpet squares, I saw him, Andrew, standing at the edge of the crowd, arms folded, no badge this time, just that same tight smile. He couldn't stop it, and he knew it. I stepped onto the pallet, raised the bow, and I didn't just play. I told stories, through music. The first piece was raw, clumsy even, but it was honest. The second built on it, layered with rhythm and resistance. By the third, I wasn't playing alone anymore. A saxophone joined me, then a voice, low and haunting, then drums, a community orchestra born of exile. The audience didn't just watch, they cried, cheered, stood, and at the end, when I lowered the bow, breathless, hands shaking from something bigger than nerves, I looked up. Andrew was gone, but two other people were waiting. One handed me a card, Independent Arts Collective. The other, she was older, gray streak in her braid, familiar eyes. "I'm Leora," she said, and just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. We talked under the burnt orange light of a street lamp, Leora and I. Her voice was low, cautious at first, like someone who's been hunted too long to believe the wolves are truly gone. But the more I listened, the more I realized something uncanny. Our stories weren't mirrors, they were echoes. Different notes, same melody. She hadn't just been erased, she'd been dismantled. One concert rescheduled, one funding decision reversed, one slanderous whisper behind a door she was never allowed to open. Her disappearance hadn't been dramatic. It had been surgical. "I used to think they were just petty," she said. "But they're careful. Petty people don't plan this well." I didn't disagree. The guild operated like a cult that wore linen and held charity auctions. They punished disobedience not with banishment, but with irrelevance. "They'll come for you next," she warned, her eyes on the crowd that still lingered, buzzing like a hive of shaken bees. That performance humiliated them. "You made the rules optional. That scares them." I smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Good." Elsie, standing a few feet away, shot me a look like she was proud and worried in equal measure. Claude was perched on her shoulder, muttering what might have been war poetry in French. I went home that night and didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid. I was awake. Electrically, terrifyingly awake. The kind of mental clarity that only comes after surviving something you weren't supposed to challenge. I laid the violin on the table and stared at it until dawn. The next morning, it began. First, the venue canceled a follow-up event I hadn't even announced publicly. "Double booked," they said. Then my email inbox was flooded with rejections, sudden reversals, cryptic apologies. One booking manager even offered me a gig, then retracted it an hour later with the note, "I didn't realize who you were." It wasn't subtle. I posted a short video, just me, the violin, and the words, "They're trying to make me disappear again." The views came slowly, then all at once. Comments flooded in, musicians, dancers, painters, writers. People who'd been boxed out, told to wait, told to comply. My inbox became a confessional. Some messages were short, panicked. Others were entire essays, years of silence cracking open in paragraphs. The guild released a statement. "Recent performances outside of formal authorization do not reflect the standards we uphold. We remain committed to curated excellence and ethical practices." It was signed by Andrew Berenger. The same man who'd tried to sell me a broken violin like it was junk. I wanted to scream, but instead, I picked up the phone. "Leora," I said. "I want to do something bigger." There was a pause. "How big?" "Big enough they can't write around us anymore." That was the beginning of the Reclamation. Not a concert, a campaign. We rented a warehouse. Cheap, ugly, perfect. Painted the walls ourselves, turned crates into chairs, scavenged cables, borrowed speakers. No guild, no sponsors, just us. We launched with a manifesto: "We are not waiting for permission. We are not broken because we are different." You do not own the definition of art. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was about voice, space, the right to be heard without filtration. We offered free performances every Friday, no auditions, no hierarchy, first come, first stage. At first, the crowd was small, skeptical, but every week, it grew. People brought food, lights, folding chairs. Parents brought children. Retired teachers brought old instruments. I met a woman who'd written poetry in secret for 40 years and read it out loud for the first time with her voice shaking like a struck bell. The guild couldn't compete. They tried to discredit us, called us reckless, amateurish, claimed we were endangering artistic integrity. But the numbers didn't lie. Our audience was real, raw, and loyal. One night, a violinist named Kareem stepped up with a back brace and fingers that twitched unpredictably. He'd been rejected from every conservatory for lack of control. But when he played, the room wept. Afterwards, he said, "This is the first time I've been allowed to play without apology." I wrote that sentence on the warehouse wall, in red paint. It's still there. Elsie watched everything like a field general. She refused to perform, but she taught, held impromptu lessons between sets, diagnosed warped bridges and bad posture with the precision of a sniper. One night she pulled me aside. "You're not playing enough," she said. "I'm organizing." "You were born to play," she snapped. "Don't let their noise become your silence." She was right. So the next week I took the stage again. The broken violin, now whole, cradled in my arms like an old friend. I played something new, something I'd written, raw, dissonant, then suddenly soft. The kind of piece that doesn't ask for applause, it dares you to stay silent. When I finished, the room didn't clap right away. They breathed. Together. That was enough. Until Andrew showed up again. This time, it was different. No badge, no false smile, just him, arms at his sides, standing at the back of the warehouse like he'd walked into enemy territory unarmed. He waited until I stepped off stage. "I need to talk to you," he said. I tilted my head. "Funny, you never did before." "I was wrong," he said. The air thinned. "I thought control was how you protect art. Turns out, it's how you kill it." I didn't speak. "I'm resigning from the guild board," he added. "You should know. You weren't just loud. You were right." I wanted to believe him, but I didn't need him to say it. This wasn't his anymore. It was ours. The next week, we held a festival. Not just for music, but for everybody who'd ever been told they weren't enough. A mother read a lullaby she'd written in a shelter. A disabled vet recited slam poetry. A trans teenager sang opera in a voice that cracked and soared in the same breath. And me? I stood at the center of it all. The woman who bought a broken violin at a flea market. The woman they tried to erase. The woman who played anyway. And when I finished my final note, I didn't bow. I looked into the crowd, at the faces that had once been afraid to speak, and I said, "Now it's your turn."